Good morning. Thank you for coming out. Let me ask first. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
No. No? Okay. I'll use it then.
There you go. Can't hear you.
Okay. My name is Jim Arab. I'm with fairtax.org, America's for Fair Taxation, District Director for Virginia's 2nd District. Thank all of you again coming out. And one of the most important things, especially now with the election cycle coming up the coming year, if you do not know, our Congressman Scott Ridgell has co-sponsored H.R. 25, the fair tax. Back in March, he was the 60th co-sponsor. We now have 62 co-sponsors total. Scott said it himself. He knew that by doing the right thing and co-sponsoring H.R. 25, he was putting a target on it. Because H.R. 25, the fair tax, is very easy to demagogue. Commercials are canned. Congressman, fill in the name, wants to raise your taxes with his, risky scheme. One of the good pieces of news is that during the last election cycle, in several congressional races where these canned ads were run against co-sponsors, because the voters were informed, knew the difference between the mischaracterizations and the flat-out lies, there was such a pushback that opposition candidates actually were forced to retract their ads in several congressional races. Which was really amazing, and that was a testament to the grassroots and the rank and file within the party supporting their elected officials. So, that's one of the reasons why it was really important that I wanted to have the opportunity, and I wish Ken was here to thank him personally for giving me the opportunity to speak. So, fair tax, what is it? I'll give you the nutshell. What I'll do is explain some of the highlights to it, and then I'll open it up for Q&A. The fair tax, H.R. 25 in the House, S. 13 in the Senate, does away with the income tax system. All of the payroll taxes, the income tax, Social Security tax, Medicare tax, employer matching contributions, corporate income tax, capital gains taxes, the death tax, the inheritance tax, all of it gone, done away with. 72,000 pages of IRS rules and regulations thrown on the scrap heap of failed government policies. Me, I kind of like that. And it is replaced with a simple, fair, transparent national retail sales tax, a 23% consumption tax on new goods and services. Okay. Usually the first reaction when I say that is someone says, 23%? Oh no! Well, the most important concept to understand, this is where it gets demagogued, the most important concept to understand, and then you realize, okay, that's not really that big a deal, is the concept of the embedded tax. Now, when you go down to the store, you buy a loaf of bread, doesn't matter what you buy as a consumer, part of the cost of the item you're buying is the embedded tax component. If you go buy a loaf of bread, part of the cost of that is the taxes that the baker is going to have to pay on his tax bill. He has to come up with that money somewhere, so he puts that into the cost of the bread. If he's got help and he's paying employer matching contributions, part of that goes into it. But it doesn't stop there. The truck driver who hauled the flour, part of his taxes go into the cost of the transportation. At the mill, the factory, the farmer who grew the wheat, all the way back to international harvester who had to pay corporate income tax on the harvester that on the combine he sold to the farmer. All the way through the production chain, there are taxes in the form of income that get passed on to the end consumer, and it's reflected in a higher base price. Okay, taxes are no different than the cost of the flour. Nationally, on average, now it depends upon the actual market sector, but the average is just under 23%. It's like 22 point something or another. Is the embedded cost. For some products it's a little bit higher, for other products it's a little bit lower. But the national average is about 22%. Okay, so that's the idea of the embedded tax. Now, what will happen under the fair tax, those embedded costs go away. Market forces, competition, will bring the base price of those goods and services down. You then add back in the fair tax, and for the most part, there will be some variation depending upon product sectors and different items, but for the most part, purchasing power items are still going to cost about the same after the fair tax as they do before the fair tax. Okay, pretty much across the board. It's revenue neutral. It changes how we fund the federal government. It doesn't lower the total amount of taxes. Well, then why bother to go through all of this? Okay, what's the purpose of it? Why the shift from income to consumption based? To me, this is probably one of the greatest single factors. It puts you, the individual, in complete and total control over how and when you pay your taxes. Okay? You are free to go out and work as hard as you want, as much as you want. You can work, earn, save, invest, grow to your heart's content, tax-free. You build the wealth. You want to go out and live the lifestyle. You want to buy the high-end luxury car? Well, you'll pay more tax than if you buy an economy car. But the difference is, it's your choice. Same percentage rate, but obviously you buy something more expensive, you'll pay more in tax. Your choice, not the federal government's. To me, that's empowerment. Here's something else. Suppose your situation is such, you're on a shoestring. You've got to make every dollar count. Transmission went out. You need to get some wheels. You need to get transportation. Go buy a used car. Again, the choice is yours because the fair tax only applies to new goods and services. Okay? If that alone is not a huge selling point, I don't know what is. Okay? 23%. One of the typical complaints, the arguments that people will say, sales taxes are regressive. They hurt the low income, they hurt the poor because their money goes to buying for the basic necessities, and now you're adding a tax that they're going to have to pay on top of that. The fair tax addresses this through what's called the prebate. Okay? The prebate is like a rebate on what a family would spend in fair tax amount up to the poverty level based on household size. Okay? It's not means tested, it's available to all legal households. And again, it's based on family size. And the numbers they're derived from the federal poverty levels that are already used to establish federal funding for all different types of aid programs. They already have these numbers in place. There's a small massaging that gets done to them to come up with the amount. On one of the handouts, there's, on one of the pages, there shows some breakdown of figures, I think it's for 2009, the fair tax amount, or excuse me, the prebate amount based on family size. Okay? Rather than going through all the numbers, one of the things that I like to do to help explain it, now the numbers are actually higher on the paper as far as the prebate amount, but what I like to do is, let's just say for the sake of argument, for the family size, the poverty level is deemed to be $24,000 a year. Okay, I like it because the numbers work out, the math is real nice. If it's $24,000 a year, that means for that family that earns $24,000, every penny goes to the basic necessities of life. Food, clothing, shelter. That's it. Everything goes just to at subsistence level, if you will. Okay? You take that $24,000, 23% of that is going to be, let me do it the other way. $2,000 a month is what the spending. Okay? $2,000 a month would be what's spent each month for that up to the poverty level. 23% of that, $460. I think the actual numbers for a family of four is up around $600 or something like that. Yes?
What happens with the state and county and city taxes? Because that's not, we don't pay just federal taxes.
Right.
So.
Okay. The fair tax, it's a great question. I'll follow up more with that a little bit later on. The fair tax addresses federal income tax. Okay. It does not address state level, but there's an issue. I'll get more into that particular question a little bit later. Okay. But as I was saying, $2,400, or excuse me, $2,000 per month, $460 would be the amount of the fair tax component that would be spent on $2,000 basic necessity of life. At the beginning of every month, that's the name Premade. Family of that size would receive either through automatic deposit, to a checking account, rechargeable debit cards. There's a whole myriad of ways in which it can be implemented, to $460. Okay, to cover the fair tax amount on the basic necessities of life, up to the poverty level. By not being means tested, it's fair. It applies to everyone. Okay. Another advantage is if you're in a position where you don't really need the prebate, if you're financially in a position where the prebate is not going to make that difference, or if philosophically you just don't want the federal government to know the size of your household, there's no requirement to file for it. It's your choice. If you want it, it is there to all legal residents. Okay, for all legal households, I should say. But there's not a mandate and a requirement to do that. So in this case, the fair tax protects the poor. And again, on one of the handouts, you'll even see that under the fair tax, because of the prebate, those at or below the poverty line actually end up with more real spending power than they do under our current tax system. Okay. Under the fair tax, it is progressive. Okay. Meaning that as you rise in income level, your spending levels go up, you're going to pay more tax. The difference is the fair tax broadens the tax base, and as a result, by bringing more people into the tax-paying system, overall effective rates are reduced across the board. The effective tax rate is less under the fair tax than it is under the income tax system. So I think that's another one that's a real strong plus. What will this do for the economy? And this is something that today people really is on a lot of people's minds with the economy and jobs. It was estimated it was between 11 and 13 trillion dollars. Okay, that's with the T. Trillion dollars, U.S. real dollars currency is invested offshore. Everything from foreign investments, foreign bank accounts, numbered Swiss accounts, okay, you name it. U.S. dollars that are offshore, and the reason they're offshore is one purpose: avoiding the tax man, avoiding the IRS. Under the fair tax, production, growth, earnings, investment is not taxed. Imagine, if you will, if only a percentage of that $13 trillion came back in, of real dollars, came back into the U.S. economy, what that would do for business and capital investment. If only $2 or $3 trillion, real dollars, was made available for business, the economy would explode. You would have economic growth that would be unheard of. Compare that to the stimulus spending of printing more money and investing, okay, where it's just adding more debt to the future. This, we're talking real dollars. It would come flooding back into the United States. Economic growth that would be absolutely incredible. Even the detractors, some of the economists who are detractors of the fair tax, still acknowledge that under the fair tax, gross domestic product over a 10-year period would still increase by 11% compared to the current income tax system. And these are the people who are down on the fair tax. They acknowledge it would grow the economy. Another aspect about business. Some years back, you may remember the merger between Chrysler and Daimler-Benz. When that merger took place, one of the final items on the agenda was, where are we going to be based? What type of corporation is this going to be? Is it going to be Chrysler-Daimler as a merger, or will it be Daimler-Chrysler? We looked at the tax rates, and there was almost 15% advantage in Germany compared to the U.S. And as a result, that merger became a German corporation, Daimler Chrysler, rather than a U.S. corporation. And that was purely as a direct result of our corporate income tax system. Under the fair tax, businesses are not taxed. That would be, without any stretch of the imagination, that would have been Chrysler Daimler, a U.S. corporation. Another aspect. How many times have you heard of, even anecdotally, somebody has a business, they've got a couple of shops, or maybe a small production facility. They're looking at the business, growth, the economy, what do they want to do? And then they sit down with their accountants and say, well, does it make, I'd really like to grow the business, and I'm going to have to, but to grow the business, I want to have to build a new shop over here, build a small plant, invest over here, put people to work. Or is it better off, is it to my financial advantage to take this older plant over here and just close it down and then take a loss and a write-off? Okay. Under the fair tax, business decisions, imagine for 1 minute making a business decision based on what is good for business, not the tax consequences and the implications of whether or not you should do it, purely on what is good for the business. Okay? So again, with that, real solid, strong points, economic growth. One of the other aspects that I'd like to convey is that, let's see, I lost it. The economic benefit, again, with the individual, sometimes with some of the detractors who have said, well, gee, the 23% rate, not realistic. The President Bush's tax panel had come back and said, well, that rate's not going to, the 23% wouldn't be enough to satisfy the tax requirements, the income stream to the federal government. Well, the way they came about that, and the way a lot of the detractors, and this is where the false ads come into play, they start with a fair tax, and then they change it. It's a classic straw man. They'll say, well, we're going to exempt this product, we'll exempt that, we'll change the rules of the Premade, we'll still leave a death tax in play, we'll do something different. They don't evaluate H.R. 25 as it stands today. So what they do is they say, here's our version of H.R. 25 with all these things that have been changed, and this is why it won't work. Okay. H.R. 25, S13. $22 million worth of independent research went into the formation of this legislation. And it shows. I've been doing this for a lot of years, taking questions, wide variety of questions. I've yet to ever have somebody come up, pose a question and say, gotcha, this is the fundamental flaw of the fair tax. We can debate whether or not businesses will in fact lower base price of their goods, or how much of that will they try to save as a windfall. You can have pro con, interesting debate about that. But I've yet to ever come across somebody who actually says, yeah, this is it, this is a gotcha. It is the most research, and it is research outside the Beltway. And one of the biggest factors with implementing this, okay, we have 62 co-sponsors in the House, 8 in the Senate. When you are in D.C., when you think of all the social issues, all the trade groups, all of the causes, pro this, anti that, over half of all the lobbying done in Washington, D.C. is over tax policy. Okay? The bottom line is that is a lot of power for a lot of people. The beauty of the fair tax, it strips that power away from the politicians and returns it to the people where it belongs. It would be the largest transfer of power from the federal government to the individuals in the history of this republic. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir.
If that is so beneficial to the corporations, why are they not lining up behind the fair tax movement en masse and supporting your movement?
Great question. For the same reason a lot of politicians are unwilling to co-sponsor. Okay? They have, you know, now we do have, separate out the politicians from our elected officials. Like Scott Ridgel, who has the conviction to do the right thing and co-sponsor HR 25. The numbers are growing. But why won't a corporation say, yeah, I'm all for this? One big reason. They know it's an uphill battle. And they have advisors, just like some of the politicians who have economic policy advisors. Their job is to advise on tax policy, on the income tax, how they have special interest. One great example, the National Board of Realtors. Okay. Real estate agents recognize that under the fair tax, people can save for their down payment tax-free. Okay? You don't have to have a special tax-exempt account. Your mattress, money under your mattress, is tax-exempt. It's a tax-free savings account. You can save for your down payment faster. Under the fair tax, mortgage interest rates would go down. It's been estimated 25% reduction in interest rates. Okay? Making homes more affordable. When you remove the embedded cost in construction, that's one of those sectors where the embedded costs are higher than the fair tax amount.
May I ask you this?
One second. To finish that thought, the National Board of Realtors is completely opposed to the fair tax. Why? The National Board of Realtors, their charter is to ensure and expand and grow the mortgage interest deduction. Okay, which is great. If we have an income tax system, you want to be able to deduct the mortgage on your interest. They oppose it because under the fair tax, they're out of a job. Personally, I think, as far as I'm concerned, they can go find some other work. Okay, but they fight it because their whole entity, their organization is based on ensuring the continuance of the mortgage interest deduction. Income tax goes away, their cause goes away, they're out of a job. And it's that same kind of mindset for some of these trade unions and business groups. They are so entrenched in, the advisors are so entrenched in the tax system that we currently have. That's why it is an uphill battle. Again, it's about power, and they're not going to give that up willingly. Yes?
May I ask this? You mentioned corporations and investors. Believe it or not, these big corporation investors are out of the country. Foreign interest. In other words, we've given our country away because we listen to the foreign investors, and they call it trade deficits. Is that a possibility? That's one reason the corporations are supporting us, because of their foreign investors.
Under the fair tax, when you eliminate business taxes, okay, when you eliminate business-to-business transactions from the tax stream, that would turn the United States into the international tax haven for businesses in the world. Businesses, foreign investment would come flooding into the United States. That would create more jobs, whether it's a U.S. corporation or if it is a foreign corporation coming in with their money to build and invest. Is that not what we want, is economic growth? Instead, we have a current tax policy which causes jobs to go overseas, and just like the Chrysler merger, they go overseas and they're based overseas because they're avoiding a tax man. I would much rather have seen a merger like that, whether there was some component of foreign investment or not, here on U.S. soil with U.S. jobs and our people going to work rather than in some sweatshop overseas. That's my personal opinion on that. But I think that's the other thing when it comes to international trade. The U.S. has the highest corporate tax rate in the world. That tax, the embedded cost, is reflected in all of our exports. Under the fair tax, that cost is gone. The base price drops for what we go, and that would make U.S. made and manufactured products more competitive on the world stage. There was a question over there. Saw a hand come up. Yes, over here earlier. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to possibly change the subject a little bit. Also, thank you for coming out this morning. In reference to the fair tax and the national sales tax, which one of our Republican candidates running for the presidency in the South was talking about, this national sales tax. It seems like they're both really compatible, but from what he described or defined about the national sales tax is that it will deal with replacing the IRS. Okay. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I take it you're referring to Herman Cain.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Herman Cain is a strong supporter of the fair tax. Okay. Since he entered as a presidential candidate, he has changed his message a little bit. Rather than so much promoting H.R. 25, the fair tax, he talks about a national retail sales tax, as opposed to the specific legislation. Yes, H.R. 25, the national retail sales tax that Herman Cain is talking about is H.R. 25. Okay. And what it will do is eliminate the IRS. If the IRS stops, there's a 3-year window for them to clean up business and finish up what they were doing, and then that agency ceases to exist. Okay? There was a question.
Before you go,
Yes.
Is the mood in our Congress in Washington, is there a mood or psyche in the people?
I am more confident. The question for those who couldn't hear it, what's the mood in Congress?
About that, the national sales.
About the fair tax. I am more confident than ever that this has the real potential to get passed. Okay, the legislation is there in the House and Senate. Senator Lugar co-sponsored. He became the 8th co-sponsor in the Senate. That surpassed what we had last year. At this point, we have 62 in the House. That's how many we got last year, or at the end of last Congress, we had 62. This is still June of the first year, 6 months into it, and we have already matched what we had during the entire last Congress. For a lot of them, for both parties, they are not going to willingly give up the power that they get from gaming the tax system, from picking winners and losers. Okay? Oh, you business group over here, yeah, you're good. You evil corporations over here, we're going to tax the heck out of you. Okay? It strips that power from Congress. And what it's going to take is not politicians, but it'll take elected officials like Scott Ridgell and 61 other co-sponsors that are not afraid to stand up and do the right thing. It's an uphill battle. But I think today with people and with grassroots movement, as people become more aware of what fair tax is, what it is and what it is not, you know, the movement is growing. If I didn't think, you know, do I personally think it can be passed? If I didn't think it could be passed, I always say when, not if. If I didn't think we could get it passed, I'd probably be out working in the garden today or something. Okay, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Yes, sir. Question over there.
Yeah, I wanted you to make the point about exports, which means manufacturing. Well, how do you answer the complaint that, well, rich people are just going to buy their stuff in Europe and therefore won't contribute to our tax revenue?
Great question. Dealing with people going and buying offshore and then bringing it in. Same thing applies today. At the port of entry, there's customs duties that apply. fair tax would be applied at that point, at the point of entry. So if somebody went and bought their yacht out in the Bahamas and then came and brought it in here, then fair tax will apply. Okay? There's a question.
Two things.
Sure.
And thanks for coming out. God bless
Thank
you.
you.
I know that I feel your pain. I do. So do I. But yeah, the poverty level. I spend a lot of time with the poverty level. Those of us on school board and city council deal a lot with it, and it appears to me to be fundamentally flawed because it is a set rate across the nation. It's not locality based. It's not regionally adjusted. Would fair tax take into account some of that? If you don't have the answer, it's fine. I got one more for you. The prebate, good idea. I like the idea. However, it still appears to me that it's means tested because at some point I've got to prove what my income is in order for it to be prebated or rebated back to me. So I don't want to shoot holes in your, and I don't want to jump all over you, but there's just a couple things that I see from the local government perspective.
Okay, great questions dealing with the prebate poverty level. Number one, there is no mechanism. I understand what you're saying is a concern that poverty levels may be different nationally, but this is a federal level replacing a federal income tax. Those poverty level statistics, the poverty level rankings and ratings, however they are calculated, they apply nationally. Now, whether or not localities have the ability to make adjustments for local purposes, that's a totally separate issue. Fair tax deals at a national level. There is no area adjustments. If you did, then that brings back in the power of the politicians to turn around and have lobbyists from, now you've got city government and state government lobbyists coming in there saying, oh, we need extra on our prebate. Fair tax is fair. It applies to everybody equally.
Well, my perspective was because it is a national level. If I looked at the cost of living in Virginia versus the cost of living in Alaska, that national poverty level appears to be an average, and it averages and median numbers don't tend to work out so well as we wanted. And I get you, and I get you with the lobbyists going up and saying, hey man, can you add another percentage here? I got you. But I'm looking for the federal government to say, if it's a federal program, then one size doesn't fit all.
I understand. There is nothing to prevent localities from doing modifications. The closest thing I can say to probably address this, not so much to say that here I have a solution to that problem, but to address it. Under our current income tax system, a personal exemption, standard itemized deduction, is the same whether you're in Alaska, California, or Florida. It applies. There's no difference in adjustments. So it's sort of like the nature of it. If you're dealing with something at a national level, and if you want to try to keep something simple and fair, you take the federal government out of the process of picking winners and losers. If anything, there's nothing to preclude localities from changing things. To answer your second point, maybe misunderstood the aspect. There is no means testing. If what's been talked about as far as the registration for it, you would have Social Security numbers. It doesn't do away with Social Security. There's still going to be Social Security credits. It just changes how we fund it. So if you are a legal household, you want to receive the prebate for all of your family members, your household of 4, fill out a postcard, an online form, Social Security number, name, address, send it in once a year. That's it. Okay? It applies to everybody. There is no means testing under the current legislation. Sir, you've had your hand up for a while.
The plan that you're talking about, it works, it's good, but there's what's changed. We've got way too many lawyers that are legislators, like my big brother Bob McDonald. And we need him and Bowling and the Italian Stallion, Coach Melon loves to talk about. I'm going to take the federal government to court. Well, what we need to do as Republicans and real American team like the Dallas Cowboys is to go after the Democrats and indict them because they have done something called tax fraud. And we need to bring back those big business that was taxed to death, to bring back that money that was stolen from the hard working folks. What we need to do is to find a way to get rid of the Democrats and their demon called the IRS. And so what we need to do between November of this year and next year is to make the Democrats to pay their own bill because they stole that money from the folks who's working. And what you're saying does work, but we need to make these Democrats realize that the government says you can't steal.
I understand what you're saying. Valid point. First off, as far as targeting Democrats specifically, I'm going to put back on or I should say, reinforce the fair tax hat. Fair tax is nonpartisan. Okay? To be perfectly honest, there are problem politicians on both sides of the aisle.
Amen.
Okay. That's why we don't have the fair tax enacted as legislation. We've got it in the House and Senate, but it's not legislation because there's too many on both sides of the aisle that don't want to give up that power, and the others we got to drag kicking and screaming. And the only way to do that is through sessions like this, informed voters who know when the politicians come out with the attack ads. Congressman Ridgell wants to raise your taxes, you know, his scheme to add a 30% tax. Bogus. Okay. But it requires voters and active citizenry to hold the politicians accountable.
Jeff?
Yes.
One more question.
Sure. Oh, okay, sure.
No, just over.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, two issues, or objections, if you will, and please don't mistake me. I think the fair tax is a great idea, and the concept that we should be taxing outgo as opposed to income is right on. There are two concerns. One is this is not income independent, as our gentleman remarked, and the other is complexity. You talked about the size of the tax code. Well, the tax code is complex because, quite frankly, people have tried, special interests aside, have tried to be fair. They have tried to take a fundamentally unfair method and make it fair, and it just gets complicated. This idea of a freebate is just bookkeeping and complexity added on to something that could be really pure. We do it in some states. We don't tax, in some states, they do not tax food. Now, if you're a low income compared to high income, food is a much larger percentage of your budget than if you're really rich. So rather than this making it complex and really going back to, yes, it is an income test. You can phrase it however you want to, but income becomes a part of it. Somebody's going to have to keep track of that. Simply have a retail sales tax and exempt certain categories, and that's it. There is no complexity beyond that.
Okay, this would be a good way to wrap that up. We got wrap up the Q&A portion of it. A couple of points. We talk about complexity. I get to use my visual aids. Great. This is available off of the fairtax.org website. This is a 36-page plain text summary of the legislation. Okay, literally goes through the legislation line by line, section by section, and just takes out the little bit of legalese. Okay, 36 pages explains it all.
You mean we don't have to pass it to see what's in it?
And you can actually read it before it gets passed.
Cool.
Okay, 36 pages. This is the legislative text, right off of thomas.org. 131 pages. Wide margins, double space, so you can
Kill more trees.
Yeah, so they can make marks and markup in the size of it, and they can put little footnotes and comments. 131 pages, full legislative text of H.R. 25 S13. These are the instructions for 1040 only. It doesn't contain the forms. 170-something pages. I lost count, and I was surprised they didn't run out of ink. This is one form, 1040. This doesn't include 1040 EZ, 1040X, 1040 anything else, all the other forms. This is 1040 instructions. You want to discuss complexity? This, even with a little bit of legalese that's in the full text, I've sat down, I've read it. I'm not a fast reader, but I read it. It wasn't difficult. The fair tax is simple and it is fair. It prevents and strips from the politicians the ability to pick winners and losers. Okay? That's not, philosophically, that should not be the role of the federal government. When it comes to the Premade, it is not means tested. Okay? It is based on household size, not income. Every legal household is eligible for the Premade. It's in the bill.
The number of people.
Based on the number of people. And if philosophically you just don't want the federal government to know how many people are in your house, don't request the Premade. It's that simple. Okay? I appreciate the questions. I've got to wrap it, but I'll tell you what, I will be here, answer questions, I guess till they throw us out, or till I lose my voice completely. I appreciate the attentive audience. More information, fairtax.org is the main national website. Wealth of information. Every business sector, there's research papers covering virtually every business sector. It's amazing. 2 books. The original Fair Tax book written by Neil Bortz and John Linder, who was the stalwart sponsor for 10 years, and a sequel to that, Fair Tax and the Truth, Answering the Critics. Puts to rest a lot of the myths and misconceptions that people came out with the false attacks. There's another book also written by Ken Hoagland. I don't have that. He's with the Fair Tax National Organization. Plenty of information. And again, anybody, if you have more questions, if you're involved in other civic groups or business social groups and you'd like me to make a little presentation, I'd be more than happy to, and give anybody that wants the contact information. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.